My name is Wesley Barnes, and if you're hearing this, understand something immediately. You were never supposed to hear it this way. There are truths that don't come wrapped in motivation or comfort. They come like a whisper behind your ear right before the blade drops. This is one of those truths. I placed my business card on the mahogany table like a final chess piece. Not dramatically, not defiantly, precisely. The kind of movement men make when they already know the outcome. Bryce Sullivan looked down at it and laughed, not a nervous laugh, not a polite one, a full, arrogant laugh, the kind that fills a room and dares anyone to challenge it. The laugh of a man who believes the room belongs to him. That laugh lasted 3 seconds and it ended his career. You see, most men misunderstand humiliation. They think it's loud, they think it's public, they think it's the moment someone disrespects you. They're wrong. Humiliation is delayed, strategic, silent. It waits. Bryce was 29, perfect suit, perfect teeth, perfect confidence borrowed from books he skimmed and mentors who protected him. He had the posture of a man who had never been punched by reality, never watched a system collapse because of one arrogant decision. I was 49, invisible by design. The kind of man corporate America uses like plumbing, only noticed when it stops working. Compliance, risk, the things executives mock until they're on fire. When he laughed, the room followed, not because they agreed, because they were afraid. Corporate life teaches obedience faster than truth. Men laugh along with power even when they know it's wrong, especially then. Bryce didn't ask what I did, didn't ask why I was there, didn't ask why Iron Veil Capital's buyers were suddenly paying attention to me. He waved the card aside like trash and said, "Compliance is replaceable." That sentence is why you're listening to this now. Because there are two kinds of men in corporate life: the ones who speak loudly, and the ones who write the rules that decide who survives the noise. This isn't a story about revenge fueled by anger. It's about what happens when arrogance collides with documentation. Stay with me. Once you see how power actually moves, you won't be able to unsee it. 14 years. That's how long I'd been inside TitanGuard systems before Bryce decided I was obsolete. 14 years of being the man who showed up when regulators circled, when audits went sideways, when executives suddenly realized their confidence wasn't admissible in court. Corporate life has a dirty secret no one puts on LinkedIn. The people who protect the company are rarely celebrated by it. They're tolerated until they're inconvenient. Bryce called it streamlining. He said it with a smile, like he was doing everyone a favor. Young executives love that word. It sounds surgical. Efficient. What it really means is cut the things I don't understand and hope nothing explodes. When he dissolved my position, the room went quiet. Not shocked, calculating. Every executive in that room knew exactly what I did. They just didn't want to be associated with it anymore. Compliance is ugly. It doesn't generate applause, it generates survival. And survival doesn't photograph well. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't remind them of the nights I spent rerouting data during storms while they slept. Men who truly understand leverage never explain themselves in the moment of dismissal. Explanation is a form of weakness when the system is already tilted. Instead, I slid my business card across the table. That was the moment Bryce laughed. To him, the card meant nothing. Just a name. Just a relic of a man he believed was finished. He didn't notice the Iron Veil Capital team stop taking notes. Didn't notice one of them lean back slightly, eyes narrowing. That's the danger of arrogance. It blinds you to shifts in the room. Because that card didn't represent a job title, it represented jurisdiction. After TitanGuard, I wasn't unemployed. I was independent, licensed, retained quietly by firms who understood one brutal truth: regulations don't care about innovation. They care about compliance. And non-compliance doesn't destroy startups slowly, it destroys them all at once. Bryce thought he was firing dead weight. What he was actually doing was removing the last man willing to shield him from himself. Corporate manipulation thrives on ignorance, on leaders who believe momentum replaces discipline, on boards who mistake youth for vision and confidence for competence. I stood up, thanked them for their time, and walked out without another word. Behind me, Bryce was still smiling. Ahead of him was paperwork, the kind that doesn't laugh back. And once it starts moving, no apology stops it. This was only the beginning. The most dangerous phase of corporate collapse is the one where everything still looks normal. Emails send, lights stay on, people joke in the hallways, and somewhere beneath that surface, rot is spreading because the one man trained to stop it is no longer paid to care. After I left TitanGuard, Bryce got busy proving he was the future. He gave speeches. He rebranded teams. He replaced policies with slogans. Executives like him don't remove safeguards directly, they starve them. Budget cuts here. Temporary exceptions there. 1,000 tiny compromises that feel harmless until they synchronize. That's how disasters are built. Within weeks, my phone started buzzing. Not from Bryce, from the people who actually did the work. A junior developer asked if bypassing an encryption check was probably fine for a demo. A vendor relations manager wanted to know if they could verbally approve a data sharing agreement without updating the compliance appendix. Each question was small, each one was radioactive. I gave them the same answer every time. Get it in writing. Here's a truth they don't teach in business school: power fears paper. Verbal orders evaporate, emails don't. And men like Bryce, men who speak in vision instead of consequence, leave trails when you let them talk. So I documented, quietly, patiently. I didn't warn him, I didn't threaten. I didn't intervene unless the risk was immediate and catastrophic. Everything else, logged, timestamped, categorized. I became invisible. And invisibility in corporate life is a weapon. Bryce mistook my silence for defeat. He mocked legacy thinking in meetings. He told Iron Veil Capital that TitanGuard was finally free from regulatory paranoia. They nodded, smiling the way investors do when they think margins are about to improve. They had no idea what kind of liability was quietly compounding. Then came the audit notice, a routine inquiry, randomized, automated, the kind that happens every year. Except this time, no one inside TitanGuard knew how to answer the questions properly. They'd never needed to, I'd always been there. Emails went out, meetings were scheduled, panic crept in slowly, disguised as urgency. Someone forwarded me a draft response just to check. It was wrong, dangerously wrong. I corrected nothing. That's another truth men hate to hear. Silence isn't betrayal when your responsibility has been terminated. The audit clock started ticking. Bryce still believed charm would carry him through. He believed regulators were just people. He didn't understand they were systems. Systems don't care who you think you are. And the system was waking up. This is where revenge stops being personal. This is where it becomes structural. And once structure turns against you, there is no room left to hide. Audits don't arrive like storms. They arrive like doctors, calm, clinical, already knowing something is wrong. And when Bryce finally understood that, it showed in the way his voice changed. He called an emergency meeting. Same glass room, same expensive table, different energy. Confidence had thinned. Jokes were gone. He stood at the head again, but now he gripped the chair like it might drift away. "This is routine," he said. "We'll handle it." That word, handle, is what men say when they don't know the process but believe authority can replace it. The auditors didn't ask about vision. They didn't care about reimagined ecosystems. They asked for documents, logs, change approvals, exception justification, names, dates, signatures. That's when the room started to sweat. The VP of engineering looked down at his notes like they might protect him. Sales shifted uncomfortably. Legal asked for time. Time is the one thing audits never give. Bryce turned to the empty chair where I used to sit. That's when he finally understood what the laugh had cost him. You see, compliance isn't about preventing mistakes. It's about proving intent after mistakes happen. And intent lives in records, policies, email chains, approvals, the things Bryce dismissed as bureaucracy. Iron Veil Capital stopped smiling. Investors don't panic, they withdraw, quietly, methodically. They start asking side questions, making private calls, preparing distance. Behind the scenes, something else was happening. My documentation folder, months of emails, directives, and temporary exceptions, was becoming valuable, not emotionally, legally. Every time Bryce told someone to bypass a safeguard, every time he promised something the system couldn't allow, it was all there, clean, organized, unaltered. I hadn't created a weapon, I'd created a mirror. And Bryce hated what it showed. He called me that afternoon. No laughter now. No arrogance. Just controlled urgency. "Wesley," he said, "we may have moved too fast." Notice the language, we, not I. Accountability diluted, standard executive instinct. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he continued. "There hadn't." I told him the truth in one sentence, the kind of sentence that changes power dynamics instantly. "I don't work for you." Silence. That's the sound men hear when the ladder they kicked away is suddenly gone. From that moment on, everything he did was defensive. And defense in corporate life is always late. You can't outrun records, you can't charm regulators, you can't negotiate with math. The audit expanded. What started as routine became focused. Focused audits find things, and when they do, they don't stop. This is the point of no return, not because of revenge, but because ignorance finally meets consequence, and consequence doesn't laugh. Corporate power doesn't collapse under pressure. It collapses under exposure. Pressure can be negotiated. Exposure cannot. Once the audit shifted from routine to targeted, TitanGuard entered a different world, one with no spin, no rebranding, no narrative control. Every decision Bryce had made to look bold now looked reckless under fluorescent scrutiny. Every shortcut looked intentional. Every smile looked like concealment. This is the part no one prepares you for, when regulators stop asking what happened and start asking who decided. That's when people begin distancing themselves. Emails include more people. Language becomes careful. Meetings get recorded for clarity. Executives who once spoke freely now say nothing without legal in the room. Fear doesn't announce itself, it documents itself. Bryce tried to regain control the only way he knew how, by asserting authority. He demanded explanations. He questioned loyalty. He reminded people who was in charge. But authority without protection is just noise, and noise attracts attention. Iron Veil Capital made their move quietly. A scheduled follow-up turned into a pause. A pause turned into pending review. Deals don't die loudly. They fade out while everyone pretends nothing's wrong. Behind closed doors, legal teams were calculating exposure, not fines, careers. The kind of exposure that follows you long after the company name fades. Bryce's name began appearing in places he couldn't delete. Meanwhile, something else was happening. People started remembering things. That's another secret of corporate life. Memory returns when risk arrives. Employees recalled meetings where Bryce overruled warnings. Developers remembered instructions that felt wrong at the time. Vendors dug up emails they'd saved just in case. And I remembered nothing because I'd already written everything down. My role in this wasn't dramatic. I didn't leak. I didn't accuse. I didn't posture. I simply responded when asked. Calmly, factually, with documents. Men like Bryce believe revenge looks like confrontation. They prepare for enemies who shout. They don't prepare for former employees who tell the truth under oath. The board finally intervened. Not to save the company, boards don't do that. They intervene to save themselves. Bryce was asked to step aside temporarily. That phrase means one thing: you're already gone, we're just controlling the timing. He didn't fight it. Fighters need leverage. He had none left. When he cleared out his office, no one laughed. No one clapped. No one made eye contact. Corporate exile is quiet, total, absolute. A week later, TitanGuard settled, confidentially, expensively. The kind of settlement that doesn't make headlines but destroys momentum. Iron Veil Capital walked away. So did two major clients. Bryce's career didn't end with a scandal. It ended with silence. And silence, when it follows laughter, is the loudest verdict there is. We're getting closer now. The lesson is about to turn inward. Corporate revenge isn't about winning. It's about surviving the aftermath with your identity intact. After Bryce was sidelined, people expected me to celebrate, to gloat, to reclaim a chair at the table. That's how small minds imagine power behaves, loud, public, needy for validation. That's not how men who understand systems move. I stayed exactly where I was, quiet, peripheral, observant, because the moment after a collapse is more dangerous than the collapse itself. That's when opportunists scramble to rewrite history, when cowards search for someone else to carry the blame, when former allies pretend they were never present. And this is where corporate manipulation reaches its most refined form. Executives began calling me not to apologize but to align narratives. They wanted my version of events to match theirs. Soft suggestions, subtle pressure. We all made mistakes. This was a cultural misunderstanding. Let's move forward constructively. That's not reconciliation, that's damage control. I declined every invitation, not angrily, not morally, strategically. Because once the truth has been documented, your silence becomes leverage. The more calmly you refuse to participate in revision, the more dangerous you appear. Men fear what they cannot control, and silence cannot be controlled. Behind closed doors, Guard began cannibalizing itself. Departments blamed each other. Legal blamed engineering. Engineering blamed leadership. Leadership blamed legacy systems. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so predictable. Here's the truth hidden in plain sight. Organizations don't rot from incompetence. They rot from arrogance layered on top of fear. Bryce wasn't unique. He was inevitable. A product of a system that rewards confidence over competence, speed over scrutiny, and image over substance. He was just the one arrogant enough to laugh out loud. And that laugh exposed the fault line. Men like Bryce always believe they're being bold. In reality, they're betting their future on other men's restraint, on the hope that the quiet ones won't document, won't remember, won't act when pushed too far. That's a losing bet. I didn't destroy his career. I didn't even touch it. I simply stepped aside and let reality do what it always does when unshielded. And now comes the dangerous part for you. Because if you've been listening closely, you should be asking yourself a question that makes your stomach tighten. Am I visible or am I essential? That question changes how you walk into work tomorrow, and once it's asked, there's no going back. This is where I stop telling my story and start talking directly to you, because halfway down this descent, the danger shifts. It stops being about Bryce. It starts being about the man listening right now. Most men spend their careers trying to be visible, recognized, applauded. They chase titles the way children chase approval. And corporate life happily feeds that hunger because visible men are controllable men. Essential men are not. Essential men make executives nervous, not because they're loud, but because removing them has consequences no one can spin. And here's the part they never teach you. The moment you become essential, you also become a threat. That's why companies try to neutralize you before they remove you. They sideline, they reframe, they label you tactical. Legacy, not aligned with the future. Those words aren't feedback. They're early warning signals. Bryce laughed because he thought I was asking for relevance. I was measuring exposure. Every system, corporate or otherwise, runs on hidden pillars. Men who know where the rules bend, where the risks accumulate, where one careless decision can cascade into ruin. Those men are rarely celebrated. They're tolerated until arrogance decides it no longer needs them. Here's the forbidden truth. If your absence doesn't immediately create pain, you are not powerful, you are replaceable. That realization should sting. It should sit heavy in your chest. Good. That discomfort is awareness waking up. Now listen carefully because this part matters more than anything else I've said. If you understand what's happening here, if you recognize the pattern, the manipulation, the quiet leverage, then I want you to mark this moment. Type this phrase in the comments. I see the structure. Then type it again. I see the structure. Not for the algorithm, for you. Because once a man admits he sees the structure, he can no longer pretend he's confused by outcomes. He stops mistaking noise for power. He stops volunteering loyalty to systems that would erase him without hesitation. From this point on, the story gets colder, more precise, less forgiving, because now you understand the real divide in corporate life, not between bosses and employees, but between men who need permission and men who operate whether permission exists or not. We're past the surface now. From here on, every section strips another illusion away, and by the end, you won't be able to sit in a meeting the same way ever again. After Bryce's removal, Titan Guard didn't become safer. It became quieter, and quiet is not stability, it's containment. Companies don't learn from collapse, they cover it up and move on. The board installed an interim executive, older, careful, not there to innovate, there to stop the bleeding. His first move wasn't vision. It was audit review, damage assessment, liability mapping. He didn't ask how to grow. He asked what could still destroy them. That's how you recognize real authority. It thinks in consequences, not aspirations. I was invited back into meetings, not formally, casually, just to weigh in. That's how organizations try to reabsorb men they pushed away without admitting the mistake. They hope proximity will feel like reconciliation. It didn't, because once you've been made invisible, you never forget what that felt like. And once you've watched an empire wobble because of arrogance, you don't rush to steady it again. Here's a truth that will make you unpopular if you say it out loud. Most executives don't want truth. They want reassurance with plausible deniability. That's why they love consultants. Consultants say the dangerous things without owning them. Operators like me, we own outcomes. And ownership terrifies people who live on optics, so I stay distant, helpful when asked, silent when not, every word measured, every interaction documented. Because the moment after revenge is where men make fatal mistakes, mistaking leverage for obligation. I didn't owe Titan Guard loyalty. Loyalty is earned through protection, not demanded through history. Outside that building, my phone rang more often. Other companies, other boards, quiet inquiries. Men who'd heard about the situation and wanted someone who understood how to prevent it from happening to them. That's another hidden rule of corporate life. Failure, when survived cleanly, becomes credibility. Bryce lost his career because he confused control with power. I advanced because I understood restraint. And now I'm going to tell you something most mentors won't, because it sounds cold. If your value depends on being liked, you are already compromised. The men who last are not the ones everyone remembers fondly. They're the ones whose absence creates immediate chaos and whose presence restores order without applause. We're nearing the end now. What remains isn't revenge, it's orientation. And once you have it, you'll never again mistake laughter for safety. Section 9, there's a moment after the dust settles when a man realizes the real cost of what he's witnessed. Not the headlines, not the money, the cost to his innocence. That moment came for me months later, sitting alone in a hotel room after a board briefing for a different company in a different city with the same problems, wearing a new logo. Same arrogance, same shortcuts, same laughter, just quieter this time. And that's when it hit me. What happened with Bryce wasn't rare. It was routine. Corporate life isn't a meritocracy. It's an ecosystem of incentives, fears, and blind spots. The system doesn't reward the best men. It rewards the loudest until they fail, then quietly searches for someone who understands why. Most men never realize they're being trained not to see this. Trained to believe success comes from visibility, not indispensability. Trained to confuse promotion with protection. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The company does not exist to serve you. It exists to survive you. Once you accept that, everything changes. You stop taking disrespect personally. You stop chasing validation from people who would replace you tomorrow. You start thinking in terms of position, not praise. Bryce laughed because he believed the system would protect him, because it always had, until it didn't. Systems are loyal only to continuity. When a man becomes a threat to continuity through arrogance, recklessness, or ignorance, the system removes him without emotion. That's not justice. That's mechanics. And mechanics don't care how charismatic you are. If there's one thing I want you to take from this descent, it's this. Never confuse confidence with competence, and never assume the man who speaks the least has the least power. The most dangerous men in any room are the ones who understand consequences and don't need to announce themselves. You don't have to seek revenge. You don't have to plot downfall. You only have to stop protecting those who don't respect the structure. Reality does the rest. That knowledge, once internalized, changes how you stand, how you listen, how you respond the next time someone laughs too easily. And they will. The question is whether you'll still need their approval when they do, because once you stop needing it, you've already won. Here, where the descent becomes permanent. Because once you understand how power actually moves, you're faced with a choice most men never realize exists. You can go back to pretending, or you can accept that you are now responsible for what you see. After Bryce disappeared from the conversation, people stopped asking his name. That's another corporate truth: status evaporates faster than it's earned. One quarter you're the future. The next, you're a cautionary anecdote whispered during onboarding, but something else lingered. Fear. Executives became careful around me. Not warm, careful. They measured their words. They asked fewer hypothetical questions. They stopped joking about cutting corners. They had seen what happens when someone who understands the structure stops cushioning their mistakes. That's the real shift. Not revenge, recalibration. Men think power is about making others afraid of you. That's juvenile. Sustainable power is when people become afraid of their own ignorance around you. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't posture. I simply asked better questions. Quiet ones. The kind that force people to confront consequences they'd rather keep abstract. It's the audit trail for that. Who signs off if this fails? Which regulation covers this exception? Those questions kill fantasies. They expose who's bluffing. And bluffing is the lifeblood of corporate manipulation. Here's something dangerous you should know. Most leaders are improvising. They rely on momentum, on teams cleaning up behind them, on men like you absorbing risk without credit. And the moment you stop doing that, without drama, the illusion collapses. That's what Bryce never understood. He thought my role was reactive, that I existed to fix problems after decisions were made. He never grasped that my real power was preventative. Prevention doesn't announce itself. It removes options quietly. Once you internalize this, you stop trying to dominate rooms. You stop chasing titles that don't protect you. You start designing your position so that removing you costs more than keeping you. That's not ambition. That's survival intelligence. By now, you should feel it, that slight unease. The sense that you've been playing a different game than the one being scored. Good. That discomfort means you're waking up. We're almost at the end. What comes next isn't advice. It's a warning. Because once a man understands the structure starts watching him back.